Hold on. What's going on with the record button? Rob, I'm not able to record.
Sure, it's recording.
It says it's recording.
Is it? Okay. It's not on
I
my
don't
side.
know.
Cool. If you guys can see it, then we're rocking. Let's go.
It's hosting Nadia. Nadia, what paragraph do you want me to start at?
The
If we
second
were
last
to
paragraph
live,
on page 6.
greetings and salutations. I'm an alcoholic and my name is Bill. Welcome here. Designed for Living Big Book Study. Previously on ADFL. We're on page 66. Just to bring us up to speed, we've made a list of our resentments. Column 1, the cause or my judgment of what someone did to moi. Column 2, what it affected in me. How did I show up when this happened? And then what the book says, we went back through our lives. We have this list now. And you can listen to the recording, but it tells us any life that includes resentment leads to futility and unhappiness. It gives us 7 death threats on that page. Then it says if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious, which means doubtful, luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholics, these things are poison. We turn back to the list. So we're going back to column 1. For that list holds the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancied, which means I imagined them to be so, or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. I believe that's where we left off last week.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks. I want to just travel back in the book a little bit in time, just for a reminder of what they're saying here. They're saying in that state where we are dominated by the world and others, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real. There's reference made to this in the doctor's opinion. Let's go check it out. Roman numerals XXVIII. By now, that page should be so earmarked because we keep referring back to it. This is a real weighty page, page 28, Roman numerals XXVIII. Thanks, Rob. Right at the bottom of the page, it says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. But it goes on to say here, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To me, my alcoholic life seems the only normal one. So these resentments and that column 1, 2, and 3, who I'm resentful at, what they did and how it affected me, has been my story since time immemorial, since my earliest memories. And now, and Bill said it last week, Gigi said it last week, she made reference to it. It's a powerful reference. We've been in the prosecuting chair for our whole lives, and now we're getting up and we're taking all of that evidence, all evidence, bag A, bag C, bag 1.2, and we're dragging it over to the defense attorney. But there's a question we need to ask ourselves here. It says, we were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Are you prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle? When I realized that I had a mind that would compel me to drink against my own will, and that I was bodily and mentally different from others, and the way that I saw the world was not the same, I was prepared entirely to look at things from a different angle. And there's a bit of alchemy that happens between column 1 to column 3. While you're jotting it down, I don't know if it was the same for you, but everybody that I've worked with through those columns, there's some alchemy that happens, and all of a sudden you start seeing that the things that these people have done to me, I start seeing that I've done these to others, or perhaps to them as well. It's a powerful process. It's a freeing process. This is just, I'm so glad we're in here again. And it says here, these again, Bill W doesn't make any bones in his writing about resentments. The previous paragraph, he mentions 4 times that it's fatal, that it'll kill us, that it destroys. Now he says again, it'll kill. How do we escape? Because we are in bondage of self, and we prayed in that 3rd step prayer for God to relieve us of the bondage of self. How do we escape? Well, this is what we're busy doing here. Now we go into column 4, and this is really where the magic starts happening. Thanks, Bill.
You're more than welcome, Nadia. If we were being recorded, we wouldn't have these new faces. We wouldn't be so nice to each other, but we're being very formal today. Let me remind ourselves before we lose sight of this. Resentments are evidence that I'm consumed in self. What I'm saying is something did not go the way that I thought it should, which means I know better than God. If you recall, the first requirement of step 3 is we had to quit playing God because it didn't work. Let me say this, Nadia, and Rob can concur this because he might have been the only person on the planet in today's day and age that was there when Bill wrote this. Why is it that steps 3 and 4 are in chapter 5? I have a feeling until these were broken down, there was no numbers. What step 3 says is being convinced that my life run by me doesn't work, and now we're going to look for a bunch of supporting evidence. We are a number-driven species, so we came up with 12 and Bill like the apostles and all that good stuff going on. But here's the deal. We are going to examine the manifestations of self. And in step 3, it says we can't be rid of it on our own. This is how we're going to do it. So when Kurt Z says the numbers eventually have to fall off the steps, I don't think they ever belong there. Now you have that on record just in case Howard D wants to listen to this and take issue with me. I will defend it. The only two steps in chapter 5, Rob, do you ever notice how it works? So here we go. Where the hell are we now? Did I read return back to the list? We did, right? Okay.
Yeah, this was
our course. We realized, it means we get realization. We're looking at things from a different perspective. That the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. So let's say that it wasn't fancied or imagined. Someone violated something and they were out of order. I did nothing to bring it on myself. From that point on, I never did anything to hurt them. What they did was very unhealthy. So guess what we know about them? They're spiritually sick because healthy people don't do that. Though we did not like their symptoms, column 2, and the way these disturbed us, column 3, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, this could be current or starting from right now forward, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God saved me from being angry. My will be done. So let's look at why would I ask God to help me to show patience, pity, and tolerance to these people on my went back through my life on my list. Because remember, the definite example that they give us, the only portrait in the book, if you want to call it that, has 4 resentments, and they're all current events, which means I'm going to be interacting. Even if my wife leaves me, I got to see her in divorce court. Even if Brown gets my job at the office, I got to go clean out my desk. So what they're saying is, what I'm trying to do is avoid retaliation or argument in the moment. Because the resentments that are consuming my life today are blocking me from the power that's going to set me free. I'll share this. I was at my old home group yesterday, and we were at a point in the book coming up to step 3, and all of a sudden they wanted to belabor their resentments from childhood. And they defended it by saying, my sponsor said, how free do you want to be? Well, the freedom that I'm going to get from my childhood resentments is when I go back and make amends for something that I had to do with that, even if it was at the very least running them down for the rest of my life. My resentments say nothing about the person I hate or the event that I believe happened or did happen. It says everything about how self-centered I am. If you got 7,000 resentments, hallelujah, you get the badge for the most self-centered person we have ever met. Because what you're saying is no one in your life ever did things the way they were supposed to. So not only did you know better than God, you knew better than the rest of the world. We're going to give you a badge for that and then bury it because you'll be dead quickly. The reality is, I'm trying to get rid of the blockage right now. We can go back. Some of us have some stuff that we've hung on to that when we get sober, I remember what Dad did to me at 7 and it eats me alive. I get it. That may be an instance where you're getting drunk over that type of rage. Nonetheless, it's a manifestation of self. And I wonder why it doesn't necessarily assign who is the sick person that I'm praying for. God save me from being angry. This is a sick person. I might be referring to this sick person looking in the mirror. I assume it's the other guy, but guess what? If I assume you're sick, guess what I'm doing again? I'm judging. I've got to quit playing God. The only sick person I'm concerned with in this is me because I'm blocked from God when I'm full of self. And what it looks like is the first evidence is resentment. We'll get to the other two very shortly. Have anything to say about that paragraph, Nod?
Yeah, that sick person, that sick person, that sick person. There's a beautiful prayer in this paragraph, and it's the sick person's prayer. You know, when we're faced with someone, oh, there's so, I mean, we could spend the next hour on this, you know. It's that spiritual axiom. When something disturbs me, there's something wrong with me. So we can say the sick prayer, sick man's prayer for ourselves as well. But it's such a lovely prayer. God, this is a sick man or a sick woman. When we're faced with that ex-husband or our mom that drives us nuts, how can I be helpful to them? Please save me from being angry. Use those three sentences. You can work with those three sentences and make your own sick man's prayer. But that is a really powerful prayer and has helped me in a lot of, oh man, I can't tell you how many how many times I've said that prayer on repeat in my workday, on repeat. And then coupled with that is another prayer that's really powerful. And this is a spiritual exercise on page 552, the second paragraph. And that is our resentment prayer. That is a prayer that we do for someone who we have resentment against, that it just sticks. It just sticks like tar on a baby blanket. This was a prayer that my sponsor got me doing right from word go. I can tell you it made no sense to me. I did it through my teeth because I mean, praying for somebody else, really? The fact that I had to pray was enough to get my going. But the fact that I had to pray for someone else, but I knew that I had to take instruction from this woman. I had no I had no other options but to take instruction from her. And on page 552, we won't go there now, but you can just make a little line out for yourself. It's where you pray for that person every day for 2 weeks. In my case, it was 18 months that I had to pray. That's how my playing God goes. 18 months to just open that oyster shell. And we pray for their blessings. We pray for their health. We pray for their joy, all the things I wanted. But here's a warning. They're going to get it. Just to let you know, from my experience, they get it. They get what you pray for. But there is, again, some beautiful alchemy that happens. And this is what's so awesome about this program. Like the promises of step 10. When we ask God, it just comes without much thought or effort. It really just comes. That's the miracle of it with us. We just ask God with these things. And again, here's another line here, the third line. It says, we ask God to help us show them patience, tolerance, pity. Because I can tell you now, you can pay me all the money in the world. I do not show patience, tolerance, or pity to nobody, unless I have God's help, because I cannot, not even my own babies. I've really tried to will myself, because I could only wrest satisfaction out of this world if I just manage well, but I cannot show people these things unless I ask God. Thanks.
If what we just read, what we read is that someone's experience in the back of the book, it is not my experience. I may be handicapped by my experience, but if what we just read was accurate, then here's what my fourth step would say. Made a list of all people we were mad at and prayed for their well-being. That would be the end of that step. If I've got a resentment that I can't get let go of after 18 days of seething, it's unfinished amends on my part. It is not them. Keep that in mind. Because sometimes we get off and we go to that story, and then you got me praying for people to change. Now I'm telling God what to do. I'm telling God who's sick, which means I'm judging, and I'm telling him how to correct these people's lives, assuming apparently that he doesn't know what he's doing, and we're back at square one. What if he doesn't do what I ask? Remember, our 4-step list, when we get to step 8, here's a little revelation. When we get to step 8, it's going to say, made a list of all persons. Well, we have a list. Oh, where did we get it? We got it from the people we've been hating and stepping on their toes. Keep in mind, I'm the only sick person in this equation. It's real easy for me to say, well, no, they're sick. Look what they did to me. Okay, so there you go. You're back in the high chair and the victim chair, and you ain't going to get better. Is that fair to state that? It's not to be, it's my experience. Like I said, not just reading someone's experience in the back of the book. I had a sponsor that called it the ass end of the book, but I won't say that because we're on recording, Rob. Okay. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. I got to share an experience, Nadia. I spoke at this meeting, watched this video the other day. It was amazing. It moved me. And I'd seen it before, but it really touched me based on the meeting we were reading. It was a little film out of Russia where a little boy in the first grade, about 6 years old, came in late to class. The teacher called him up front, and in front of all the other students, he had him hold out his hand and he hit him with a metal ruler. This happened 3 days in a row, same experience. Finally, on the 4th day, the little boy walks up, assumes a position, puts his hands out, but instead of getting swatted, the teacher sets the rulers in the little boy's hand and then gets down on his knees and embraces the little boy. Unbeknownst to the little boy, that day on the teacher's way to school, he found out why the little boy was late. He had a brother that was a paraplegic in a wheelchair, and he had to push him to some rehabilitative therapy class, so he was always going to be late. So when we're talking about looking at that list from an entirely different angle, all the teacher saw was a kid walking through the door late. He didn't know what happened before he walked through the door. So guess what? Some of the things may have happened, but I tell myself a story that isn't true. And then I punish people for being late, and I don't realize they couldn't help but to be late because they're going to be late all the time. And the amazing part about that story, Nadia, is that little boy loved his brother enough that he was willing to take the whooping every day. That's an amazing story. Changes my perspective because guess what? Sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes what I think I see isn't accurate at all. Sometimes it's the tail end of a story, and I think it's the beginning of the book. God saved me from being angry. Did you want to say anything about the retaliation? I think we addressed that, right?
Yeah, I also I've said this many times, but it really isn't just when you share what you've just shared, it reminds me of one of the many gifts I've gotten in this program, and that is a second childhood and a second life. So I'm twice born, and I have had 2 childhoods. The one I told myself I had, and the one I told anybody who'd give me 5 minutes, an hour, a day, years to hear my sad story and give me a shoulder, how terrible my parents were. But after I'd swallowed some huge chunks of truth about myself and eaten some very stale humble pie, that stuff's better eaten fresh. Trust me. After I'd chomped some of that stuff, I got to have a second childhood. And I got to have 2 parents who were really actually quite loving and quite present and really doing the best with what they had. the very little that they had. And there's another instruction in this book. It says, we avoid retaliation or argument. That is an instruction because remember, the idea that we are like other people has to be smashed. That means that we don't respond to other people. We don't respond to the world like we did or like other people get to. We have very clear instructions in this book, and some of them I'm going to highlight on now. We avoid retaliation or argument. That is not for us. That is not for us. Just like Bill said on the preceding page on 62, the second paragraph, the grouch and the brainstorm are not for us. They're the dubious luxury of others. They're not for us. And another place where it tells us how we do not get to behave is on page 77, the third paragraph. It says there that under no condition do we criticize a person or argue. There's some, for you guys that are spearheads, children of God, agents for God, remember our work contract on page 63, those are some very, very clear instructions from HR. We will get called in very quickly, and you will get blocked off from the sunlight of the Spirit. We do not get the luxury of behaving that way.
You done?
Yeah.
And keep one thing in mind. Until I discover that I'm the problem, most of the time what I'm looking with. You hear what Nadia said? We don't get to respond like the rest of the world. The rest of the world usually doesn't respond like that. There are really some pretty healthy people out there that kind of keep everything going, and then I come along and want to readjust it, arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and then all of a sudden I'm over here telling you how many sick, normal people there are in the world. They don't even know that I got behind the camera. Matter of fact, they didn't even know I was on the set because they were concerned with themselves and what they were to be doing. They were inside of their hula hoop. I was the one who was jumping out. I got out of my bed. Okay, referring to our list again. It's a very important list. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. We resolutely, that means we make a resolution to look for our own mistakes. Question, where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. If I was reading this, if I'm following these instructions, I think what it's saying to me is those people's names begin to evaporate off the list by my third appearance, my third visitation to this list. I'm going to try and put them out of my mind entirely. Like in the movie Back to the Future, the kids were fading because the parents didn't kiss under the star. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. So remember what it says up here. We tried to disregard the other person entirely, and we put out of our minds the wrongs others had done. We've just eliminated the first two columns on our big inventory, and I can't wait to sit down with my sponsor. All I've ever told people about is the first two columns, and it tells us to conclude that they were wrong. Columns 1 and 2 is as far as most of us ever got. If I don't get to 3, 4, and 5 in the columns, depending however many you determine that they're asking you to write out, if I don't get past column 2, the world and its people continue to wrong me and I stay sore. The great example is all of a sudden I get rid of all the idiots in Cleveland. I move to Florida and I find out that all their cousins are there waiting for me. I take me and my judgment, my perception, and the way I see things with me everywhere I go. This is about having a psychic change, a change in the way I think, a change in the way I perceive things. My attitude, my reactions, and my thinking must be changed. Because if not, I'm going to tell myself the same story in a different town with different characters, and the results will be the same.
Thanks,
The
Bill.
inventory was ours. That's what we're talking about. Sometimes what I'm seeing is not happening. It's a reflection of my heart. As I've said, gossip, criticism, what I think, say, or feel about you says very little about you, and it says a whole lot about me. When my heart is black, you look ugly to me. When I'm afraid, you look threatening to me. When I'm dishonest, you look like you can't be trusted. I've created a prison based on the way I live, and it's coming out of me in the form of a reflection. When I see these things in you, I thank God for the mirror that He's brought into my life, because you helped me to see that which I could never see about me. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white, or in white and black, depending on what color paper and what color ink you have. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set these matters straight. Well, hold on. We just went from a whole bunch of people doing things to me. Now I'm going to be willing to set things straight because I'm the one who's wrong. Are you people tricking me again? Came to AA for a drinking problem. When you got done with me, I found out I didn't have a drinking problem. Something's going on here. And I don't have another people problem. And other, two separate words. What I have is a problem with Bill Swan, and I'm blocked from God because I see things wrong. I've taken his seat. I'm finding fault with everything he does. And I'll tell you this much, we said it today, was very enlightening. Let you in on a little clue. If you watch the show Pinocchio, you can't see the strings, but Geppetto's running stuff whether you like it or not. Quit getting tangled up, Pinocchio. Just go along with Geppetto. Everything's laid out for us. But I want to fight. Matter of fact, if my nose grew as many times as I was dishonest or self-willed, I don't know, go all the way across the United States, maybe even over into Africa, Nadia, you're up.
And here in Africa, I'm just being reminded of the 3 essentials of this that we bring to the program. We get all the other stuff gets given to us, it gets added to us, but we have to come to the table with 3 things: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Where'd you get that from, Nadia? Well, I don't know. It says in the back of the book on page 5, there it is, 568. It says that we find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of this program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. So we've been painstaking about this phase of our development, right? Because we have been painstaking. It's an hour a page. And in step 4, we are being painstaking and thorough. And what Bill's reiterating here, he says at the bottom of page 66, right, the very last line, perhaps they were spiritually sick. So perhaps bring some open-mindedness. Yeah, okay, we got some open-mindedness. Great, we can tick that. You're still on track. Right at the bottom of the 3rd paragraph on page 67, we admitted our wrongs honestly. There's a 2nd essential. Yeah, all right, okay, we're ticking. Good, I see a lot of heads nodding. Awesome. And the very 3rd, and then the 3rd little word there, willing to set things, the record straight. So now we do a quick little pit stop. Is there honesty? Is there open-mindedness? And is there willingness? Yes. All right. We can keep this engine going. We can keep going because we've got 2 more inventories to power through. And there was something else that I want to note here. It says the very first question we ask here is, where was I to blame? What? I thought you said, I heard in the rooms that I must look at my part. The thing is, I'm an alcoholic. I don't have a pot. My pot is just a tiny sliver. Yours is the whole damn cake, and everybody else's, and it's a 3-layer cake as well. I had my sponsor ask me this question, Nadia, where were you to blame? Wow. Wow. That's a big question. That's a big question. Yeah. And there was one more little thing. Yes, resolutely. Remember I've shared this with you before, that I came in here thinking I'd swallowed a thesaurus and the Oxford Dictionary and I'd studied them and I know all the words in the English language. you don't need to teach me nothing. I know everything. Old ideas. Remember what it says, chapter 5, that first in the preamble? Some of us try to hold on our old ideas. Let me rephrase that. Nadia tries to hold on the fact that she knows the whole English language. That's my old idea. And it really blocked me from deeper experiences in this book, deeper experiences in this process. So I went and looked at the word, I looked at the words that I thought I knew. And one of them I thought I knew was resolutely. Very simply put, 100%. 100% we look for our own mistakes. We do not look at the other man's. So yeah, Google is your best friend when you're trying to get rid of some old ideas. Thanks, Bill. I'm very formal today. You look amazing. You're like super formal and it's got me all, professional like, so bear with me. Famous Zoom words. You're muted.
Oh, that's good, because I was on tape saying I tried to talk the judge into putting one of my sponsees in prison, make it a lot easier on me. So we went to court today for one of my sponsees, because in chapter 7, it says you may have to go to court, call the police, all that good stuff. And since Nadia jumps around in the book, I had another one of those little revelatory experiences today when I was reading step 10 on page 84, the instructions. If you take a second out of your day and go there. It's real simple. At the bottom of the page, and I haven't gone through all of it yet, but I know I'm onto something. It says, we will seldom be interested in liquor. And what I did is drew a little line down from liquor and I put any other defects. And then I put the word self. I will seldom be interested in my defects. If tempted, I will recoil from them like a hot flame, because they are as dangerous to me. They call alcohol one of our things. When we get to 6 and 7 in the 12 and 12, the book says if God can relieve the alcohol problem, why can't he remove any of these other defects? Maybe he can. So when the self-centered wants to rear up, I recoil from it because it's danger, Will Robinson, just like a drink. We'll get to that page eventually. I just thought I'd give that to you. You can't say nothing's original anymore, because I'm pretty original sometimes. At least I think so. Here we go. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and his wife. Remember, we're back now on the diagram on page 65. They're referring to that. Notice that the word fear is really bracketed alongside the word self-esteem, right? That's one of the difficulties, self-esteem. This short word, fear again, this short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. My sponsor said if it has the word evil or devil in it, it probably didn't come from God. You got a whole lot of people running around AA saying they have healthy fears. None of my fear has ever been healthy. Someone gets hurt when I get afraid. We're going to read something else, which will come in from the first manuscript. If you want to check it out, they took 3 words off of this, but I'm going to tell you what they were, and then it maybe fall into place and make sense. Fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It's set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. I live in Cleveland. We have a lot of steel and ore distribution places going across. And guess how they get them there? They get them there on these trains. Real trains, moving trains, choo-choo trains. Now, if you get caught on the tracks when the things go down and can't get through, sometimes you have to turn off your engine because you may be sitting there for 20 minutes because there's so many cars connected to the locomotive. Could you imagine if what this is telling me is that, like a train, I set things in motion and it just, you can't stop a locomotive real quick. You watch all those movies Hollywood makes. They're throwing the breakers. You're not going to slam on the brakes if someone's on the train tracks and not run them over. They're dead. It takes a long time to stop something that I have set in motion, which bring me misfortune, box loads, carloads of misfortune. And just like, because usually I don't think so, self will run riot. It says, I feel like I don't deserve this misfortune. I'm bringing it upon myself and don't even see it that way. I don't know if I deserve it, but I could stop it with God's help. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? There goes old Billy Boy standing there with the switch. The train's running just fine, Rob. And what I do is I put a course and go on another track. And then when it runs into my house, I get mad. Now, here's what it says. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. When this originally came out, there were 3 more words at the end of that sentence. It said, as a sin. We did a whole podcast on that. It seems to cause more trouble. Fear seems to cause more trouble than stealing. Why is that? If stealing is a sin and thou shalt not steal, then thou shalt not be afraid is above it at the top of the list, because I do not believe that God in his wisdom, we are wonderfully and marvelously made, ever placed in us anything that contains fear. That's why it makes us crazy. Resentment's not far behind in the harm done others. I don't need a God to sentence me to hell. I'm doing it myself. I don't need anyone to punish me. Everything that I've done wrong that lives inside of me is a perpetual punishment brought on by me. Some people call it karma, which is another word of saying my doing. I'm doing it to myself. What do you have to say about that paragraph, mate?
Oh man, my whole life was, the narrative of my life is fear. Fear of what you thought of me, fear of what I was going to lose, fear of when I was going to get what I wanted. Was I going to get what I wanted? And when I got it, was I going to lose it? I remember my first baby. My first thought was I was going to lose her. I remember my first marriage. My first thought was, I'm going to lose him. He's going to die. Everyone was going to die. And what would happen when they all died? Then I would be alone, and I would die alone. Fear ran my life. I was terrified of my shadow. I was terrified of the group that I was in. I never fitted. I wanted to belong. I've craved fellowship. And then I would do the craziest things when I was in it, and I would end up outside of it, because that's exactly like Bill just said. I set these trains in motion. What I fear is what materializes. And there's another book that they recommend to us on our morning and after evening pages, that we be quick to see where religious people are right. And my sister Cynthia Inya will agree with me that they speak about that other book. In that other book, they speak about the thief, that fear. It says the thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And in this program, I learn and I check, when I go to pause land, when I pause, I check, am I operating from fear or am I operating from love? Fear runs the show for me. And what does it say in the book? It says on page 60, page 62, the second paragraph. Fear not only is the blanket emotion for me, or the blanket experience, fear drives me. Fear's got me in a harness like those huskies in the snow, and it's sitting on its sled and it is whipping me and driving me, and we'll only stop when fear's done. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you very much, Nadia. And Rob put something in the 12 and 12, and I appreciate he did it because it'll stop me from contradicting myself. Because it says it's primarily two chief activators that I won't get what I want or I'll lose something that I have. It almost contradicts what it says on page 62, where it says driven by 100 forms. There may be a whole lot more things that I'm afraid of, but they're saying primarily. Am I going to lose my reputation? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my wife? Am I not going to get that job? Am I not going to get that wife? Am I not going to have that reputation? I get it, but there's a whole lot of, we're going to be real thorough here because here's what it says. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. If there were only two, that's not too hard to do. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So we had fear listed by the resentment inventory. We're going to bring those over here and look at them if we haven't seen how they were the evidence of self in that resentment column. If we haven't identified how fear keeps setting this stuff in motion and being the evil and corrosive threat of my life, we're going to list them over here. We're going to ask ourselves why we had them, but they're going to answer. They do not want me to come up with an answer. They're going to tell me why I have them. Wasn't it because Bill Swan, relying on Bill Swan, was what was defeating Bill Swan? Self was killing me, and I couldn't stop it on my own. Sometimes, self-reliance was good as far as it went. I could rely on myself to get dressed in the morning. That's about as far as I could go. But it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem. Anything that emanates from self is not enough to overcome this evil and corrosive thread that I have no place to harbor inside of me. Gets inside of me, contaminates, infectious is what it is. And self-confidence didn't solve that or any other problem. But when it made us cocky, say I got it right once in a while, and then I go and gloat and boast. When it made us cocky, it was worse. It was worse than self-confidence. It was worse than self-reliance. Pride cometh before the fall. Perhaps there is a better way. The people who wrote the book think so. For they were now demonstrating that they were on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. One is unlimited, infinity, and the other is limited to what you see sitting in this chair right here, and maybe not even all that. Listen to this right here. We are in the world to play the role he assigns. I remember a guy called me when I was down in Florida. He said, "Have you found your assignment yet?" I said, "What? Have you found your assignment yet?" Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? Do you know the extent the things that we do that we think God would have us to do are the opposite of the instructions for step 3? Quit producing confusion, be harmonious, quit being in collision, quit complaining, quit trying to have your way, quit trying to run the lights or show the ballot. Stop it. Quit doing God's job. Anything other than that is exactly what he assigns me to do. But that's not enough for Billy. I got a lot of spare time on my hands, like it's not hard enough to take care of this idiot. And what I want to do is God's job. And it doesn't work. It puts me at odds and it fills me with fear. Go ahead, Nadia.
Thanks, Bill. I'm not going to say much more on that, but I do want to just pedal back a little bit and just remember the instructions that we are given here twice within 3 pages. On page 67, Bill says here, or they write here, he says, we place them before us in black and white. And Bill jokingly said, or white on black, white pen, black paper, whichever way you want it. And on page 64, they say, yeah, we set it down on paper. So for some of us, we'll be sponsoring Gen Zs pretty soon. And after that, we'll be sponsoring people who've probably never seen a pen and paper. There's an instruction there, clear-cut instructions. Yeah, Chrissy, got them thumbs going. We're asking for pen and paper. So when your Gen Z shoots off their inventory on a Google Doc, or no, honey, let's follow those clear-cut instructions. Let's get out the pen and let's get out the paper. That's all I wanted to add there, Bill. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a brilliant point. There's something therapeutic when it's in my handwriting with my hand in my pen, because it's coming from me. We never, ever, not once, apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be, not what he would have us do, what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. That doesn't mean they're all gone. But at once, we begin to outgrow fear. You ever outgrow shoes? When you're 5 years old, you wear a size 3 in the baby section. And then the second grade, you can't even get them over your toes. You've outgrown them. This is talking about fears that I haven't been able to outgrow on my own. There's some stuff I'm going to be able to outgrow naturally. The ones that I can't are the ones that I've set in motion, that I've created, that I have to have God's help. And I think that this paragraph is saying a whole lot, Nadja. I'm almost tempted not to. I mean, who am I? Why would it say we never apologize to anyone for depending upon God, our Creator? Where does that come from? We're not talking about anyone. We're writing a fear inventory. What are we talking about here? Because there's going to be a change in my life. I know who the change is, and I'm not going to say I'm sorry. My original sponsor here called himself an unapologetic Christian. I think that's what he meant. The verdict of the ages, all men of earth, they trust their God. We never apologize for God. What does that mean? We let him apologize for himself? No, he doesn't apologize because he does nothing wrong. I don't have to apologize for God. I'm on a different basis now. My whole life was geared on self, doing things the way I wanted to, creating confusion, disharmony, divisiveness, all the things that we discovered. And now all of a sudden, guess what? I came to believe, I surrendered to the belief, I worked with the power, and I ain't apologizing now because guess what? My life's working a whole lot better. You're not going to condemn me to my past no more. Nadja, I know we're going to stop at fear if you have anything to say, and then we'll let our people come in because it's already 12:58. I didn't realize the time got away with us.
We were having a lot of fun there, Bill. I'll just tell you very quickly, I want to add here. It says, so this is a fear prayer. When we're feeling fearful and you got that heart rate going up and your face is starting to flush, you're feeling embarrassed, you're feeling fearful, you got to go into a mall, you don't like lots of people, you've got to go meet up with that boss, and it's your monthly quarter review, whatever it is that makes you still panic and fearful. There's a powerful fear prayer here. We ask God to remove our fear, number one, and direct our attention to what he would have us be. What does he want us to be? Well, let's go look. Page 133. We are sure, second sentence, we are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. Gotcha, Andrew. Thank you. So that's what we do. We stop. God at once remove this fear. Turn your thoughts to happy, joyous, and free. And at once we commence to outgrow fear. That's a promise. That's a promise. We just got to ask. It just comes. Where do I get that from? On page 85, it says there, and that's one of the step 10 promises. In the middle of that first paragraph, it says it just comes without any thought or effort. We just got to ask. Reminds me of another book that says, ask and you shall receive. You shall receive happy, joyous, and free. So on that note, I'm going to say good night, because the role that I've been assigned is a mama who's got to make dinner and get everybody sorted out this side. So thank you so much for being here with me, Bill. I love you guys. Ali, Rob, thanks for keeping the doors open. See you all next week.
I'll turn off the recording for one more second, Nadia. I'm going to capitalize on what you just said. Remember, fear is the second manifestation of self. We had what we call a resentment prayer and a fear prayer, but guess what it really is? Relieve me of the bondage of self. These are bondages of self. Specific little hints to ask God when that manifestation of self shows up. But ultimately, relieve me of the bondage of self. Take away my difficulties. That's what this is all about. Step 3, part A, B, C, and D. I told you, we only need one step in this program. Step 3, I'm wrong. Okay, it's up to you guys now. Let's go.
All right, this is where you get to talk. You get to jump in, unmute yourself, ask us questions, share what was lined up for you tonight, what stood out for you, what you're experiencing. Andrew, we're dying to hear from you. I saw you nodding your head furiously there.
Your recording's still on, Nadia, huh?
No burning desire. Glad to be here.